This is CNN Breaking News.
And you are watching CNN Newsroom. I'm Rahel Solomon, where we are following breaking news this hour. A major 7.7 magnitude earthquake has rocked Myanmar and Thailand. Officials in Bangkok say that one person is dead, 50 others are hurt in a collapsed building in the capital. And the prime minister there declaring the capital city an emergency zone. CNN photojournalist Mark Phillips in Bangkok says that the tremors were violent. A resident of the city shot this video, and you can see water splashing out of a rooftop pool there on the high-rise apartment building next door. The USGS says that the quake had a depth of 10 kilometers or 6 miles. A large aftershock of 6.4 magnitude happened about 12 miles after the initial quake. Let's bring in CNN's Hanako Montgomery, who joins us live this hour in Osaka, Japan. Hanako, give us a sense of what's the latest you're hearing. What are you learning?
Hi, Rahel. As you just described, a very large earthquake hit Myanmar, one that measured about 7.7 in magnitude. And the earthquake was so powerful that it was felt in neighboring Thailand and also China. Now, as you just described, at least one person has died in Thailand, and at least 50 people we know have been injured. And we actually don't know how many are actually currently missing. Now, of those people who died and also were injured, they were all victims of this very large building that came tumbling down. Now, I think you just saw that video, but this video shows there's a building under construction, very, very tall, and as soon as that very powerful earthquake hits, this building comes crashing down with dust billowing out, construction workers literally running for their lives in the opposite direction as the ground below them is trembling. Very, very frightening for these individuals. Now, in another video, we saw that a very tall skyscraper, a very tall building with a swimming pool on top, had the water coming down as though it was a waterfall. Again, a very, very frightening experience for those residents in Bangkok. Now, in terms of Myanmar, where the earthquake's epicenter is actually located, we know that it occurred and it was hit in the city of Mandalay. Now, Mandalay is actually the historical and religious capital of Myanmar. There are about 1 million residents there, and it is home to many, many temples, and it really has a very rich history. But of course, we don't actually know how many of those buildings are still intact because, again, of this very powerful earthquake. And Rahel, of course, it's important to note that there is a civil war going on in Myanmar right now. So the information coming in and out of the country is very limited. We don't know how many people have died. We don't know how many people have fallen victim to this very powerful earthquake and also the aftershock that happened after it. But we do know, according to one resident who was there, and the earthquake hit about 1 p.m., they said that the electricity went out and it was very frightening and it felt as though they were going to die. Now, also important to note, Rahel, is that Myanmar is one of the poorest countries in Asia, and they don't actually have the infrastructure to withstand these sorts of very powerful earthquakes. So there's a lot of fear here, Rahel, that there could be a lot more injured and potentially a lot more dead. Now, the fire brigade has been dispatched in Myanmar, and they are currently looking for any remaining survivors or any people who might need help. Rahel.
All right, Hanako Montgomery live for us here in Osaka. Hanako, we will check back with you shortly. Stay with us. In the meantime, I want to now go to Singapore, and joining us now is Shanji Wei. She's an associate. He is an associate professor at the Asian School of the Environment. Great to have you this morning. Just your first reactions as we continue to learn more about this earthquake.
Yes, when I first saw the news, well, it is not an unexpected event based on our research. So myself and the other teams in our institute, we have been investigating the seismic hazard in Myanmar since about 10 years ago. So the earthquake took place along the segment of the Sagan Fault, which is a plate boundary type of fault. It's a major fault in Myanmar. This fault has hosted big earthquakes in the past few hundred years, and it has been quiet since about 200 years ago. Mm-hmm. And based on these historical studies as well as modern geophysical investigations, we know that this segment of the fault is likely to rupture as a big earthquake in the near future. Mm-hmm. So we have been communicating with the Myanmar governments as well as local scientists, highlighting the potential high-risk seismic risk along this segment of the fault. So this earthquake to us is not unexpected.
Yeah. And to that point, I mean, as our reporter was just sort of discussing and alluding to there, I mean, this was something that you and your researchers and team had been tracking, the science community perhaps had been expecting, but obviously the domestic politics in Myanmar right now, the situation on the ground there perhaps made it more challenging for officials there to perhaps pay attention, as you say, to the warnings that you've been trying to issue.
Exactly. Well, given the political and also the economic status of the country, I think the multiple cities along the Sagan Fault is very vulnerable and kind of at the high seismic risk. So yeah, we as scientists, we try our best to provide the best scientific information to the stakeholders.
And just give me a sense, I mean, 7.7 magnitude, give me a sense of what that means. And just as far as we know that it's been felt, you know, the edges of China, Bangkok, I mean, just sort of put that in context for us.
Sure. Given the size of the magnitude as well as preliminary seismological results that we know this earthquake probably produced the rupture along more than 300, at least 300 kilometers long. It ruptured these long distance along the fault. It probably, it's very close to the major cities like Mandalay, Naypyidaw, and other smaller cities along the fault. Besides those near fault cities, major cities, nearby countries like Thailand and probably part of China's Yunnan province of China, they might have felt strong shaking as well because the earthquake is big enough to produce very strong shaking, even hundreds of kilometers away from the epicenter.
All right, we're going to leave it here. Sanjay Wei, we appreciate you being with us this morning. Thank you. And for now, I want to go to Jack Brown, who saw firsthand what played out after the quake hit in Bangkok. He is speaking with us now from the capital. Jack, great to have you this morning. We can see what appears to be motorcycles or people just sort of rushing by you. Give me a sense of what it's like where you are and what you're seeing and hearing.
Good morning, America. Yes, it's been quite an ordeal, to be honest with you. I was on my way to a client meeting on an elevated expressway when what I initially thought was a burst tire in the car because it was sort of swaying a bit. So I pulled over to the left-hand side and I noticed a lot of the other cars around me were doing the same. People were driving quite haphazardly and we couldn't really understand at the time what was happening. Anyway, I stopped the car and the car was still moving quite a lot. Then I realized immediately it's an earthquake. So people were still sort of driving very slowly, confused. Everyone just didn't really know what they were doing. Nobody was driving orderly. And then suddenly we just seen the collapse of the building right in front of us on the left-hand side, which is an area called Jatuljak, near very famous Jatuljak markets. It was a building which is currently under construction, and the whole thing just collapsed. And obviously, my initial thought was that if anybody is in that building, then 100% it's going to be fatalities for sure. And what I found out later on was, sadly, there's still 67 people unaccounted for in that building. Rescue efforts are underway, but Bangkok now is absolute gridlock. There's a lot of high-rise in Bangkok, apartments, offices. People are outside of those buildings now, I think, waiting for the go-ahead to re-enter the buildings. So I think everyone is just sort of just stuck, waiting, really. You can see by the traffic in the car here, nothing's moving. I've been sat in the car for 2 hours now. Can't really go anywhere. There's a lot of emergency service vehicles trying to get through. People on foot, despite the 39-degree heat. I think people are just waiting, really. Of the unsure if there's going to be any aftershocks. There's talk about there could be additional aftershocks and things like this.
Yeah, and just, for people who perhaps have not been to Bangkok, I mean, just give us a sense. I mean, it is a very busy city, really at all hours of the day. So when this happened, I mean, you were there to actually witness what appeared to be a building collapse, but just sort of give me the sense of the reaction you were seeing, what you were hearing, and just the fear that this, obviously, as we look at this video, this would have caused in such a busy city.
Sure. I mean, earthquakes are not common in Bangkok or in Thailand. I've been living here for over 10 years. This is the first earthquake I've ever experienced here. So I think it took most people off guard. You know, people weren't expecting it or they didn't recognize the signs of an earthquake. So I think originally, a lot of people probably thought it was their car or they felt dizzy or something, you know, and a lot of confused people, a lot of panic, I think, especially when seeing the building coming down. People got out of their cars immediately on the expressway. It just came to a standstill. There was a lot of fear, a lot of panic because people don't know what's going to happen next. Are any other buildings going to come down? Are there any flow-on effects on an expressway even, which is elevated? Is that going to crumble? Obviously, people are frightened.